All right, I need your full attention right now because what I'm about to walk you through is unlike anything America has ever seen before. And I don't say that casually. I've used the word unprecedented before for events that were serious, events that mattered, but still had limits. This is something else. At 3:14 this morning, Eastern Time, a messenger left the Vice President's residence at the Naval Observatory. That messenger was carrying two sealed envelopes. One was addressed to the Speaker of the House of Representatives. The other was addressed to the President pro tempore of the Senate. Inside both envelopes was the same documentation. One page, signatures from the Vice President and a majority of the sitting cabinet. And that document said, in the formal constitutional language, that the President of the United States is unable to discharge the powers and duties of the office. If you are just coming in now, the basic structure of what is happening is already clear. The constitutional machinery has been triggered in real time, and it is absolutely essential that you understand exactly what that means. Section 4 of the 25th Amendment has been invoked for the first time in American history. But here is the core problem. This is where it stops being a constitutional process and becomes a real crisis of state. The president is not accepting it. The president is not stepping aside. According to multiple sources inside the White House, the president is physically barricaded inside the residence, ordering the Secret Service to keep the vice president from entering the grounds, and publicly declaring that what has happened is not constitutional, but an illegal coup against a sitting president. Which means that right now, in this exact moment, the United States has two people claiming to be commander-in-chief. Two people issuing orders, two people insisting they hold the authority of the presidency. And trapped right in the middle of that contradiction is the entire machinery of the American government, starting with the people responsible for the nuclear arsenal. Before we go any further, we need to be very clear about what Section 4 of the 25th Amendment actually says and what it actually does, because there is a lot of confusion around this. And that confusion matters. That confusion is part of what is feeding the crisis. Most people, when they hear the 25th Amendment, think about succession. The president dies, the vice president becomes president. That is Section 1. It is straightforward, it is clear, it has been used before. Section 4 is a completely different thing. Section 4 was written for a situation the people who drafted it hoped would never happen. It was created for the moment when a president is alive, conscious, and still claiming authority, but the people closest to them, the vice president and the cabinet, have decided that the president cannot or should not continue exercising presidential power. Maybe the president has had a stroke and cannot communicate. Maybe they have undergone surgery and are incapacitated. Or, and this is the difficult part, maybe the people around them believe their judgment has become so impaired, so dangerous, that the republic itself is at risk. Under Section 4, the vice president and a majority of the cabinet, meaning 8 signatures, can send a written declaration to Congress stating that the president is unable to discharge the powers and duties of the office. The moment that declaration is received by congressional leadership, presidential power transfers to the vice president. Not after a vote, not after hearings, not after a court reviews it, immediately. Like a circuit breaker being flipped. That transfer happened at 3:14 this morning. Constitutionally and legally, the vice president became acting president at that moment. But the Constitution also gives the president a way to push back. The president can send their own written declaration to Congress saying they are able to serve. Once that happens, their powers are restored unless, within 4 days, the vice president and cabinet send a second declaration rejecting that claim. If they do that, the question goes to Congress. That is the phase we are in now. The declaration has been delivered. The president has not yet sent his counter declaration, but sources say that letter is being drafted right now. Let me give you some history that matters here. In October of 1919, President Woodrow Wilson suffered a massive stroke. He was left partly paralyzed. His speech was affected. His mental function was seriously weakened. And for the final 17 months of his presidency, the American public was basically kept in the dark about the true condition of the man leading the country. Wilson's wife, Edith Wilson, controlled nearly all access to him. She decided what papers reached his desk. She filtered which advisors were allowed to see him. In practice, she was making decisions around him and for him while preserving the appearance that Wilson was still governing. When the truth eventually came out, lawmakers were horrified. The idea that the presidency could effectively be trapped inside a medical crisis, that there was no clear constitutional process for handling a president who was alive but incapacitated, became a serious national concern. That concern only grew stronger after President Kennedy was assassinated. What if Kennedy had survived Dallas but remained in a permanent vegetative state? What if a president had a heart attack during a nuclear emergency and could not communicate, but also could not legally be replaced? The 25th Amendment was ratified in 1967 to deal with exactly those kinds of scenarios. It was meant to protect continuity of government. It was meant to make sure the country was never left without a functioning chief executive. But here is what the people who wrote that amendment assumed. They assumed good faith. They assumed that if a cabinet ever took the extraordinary step of declaring a president unable to serve, the president would understand the seriousness of the moment and cooperate with the constitutional process. They did not imagine this. They did not imagine a president looking at the Constitution and saying it does not apply to him. If you understand how serious this moment is, like this video right now. This kind of breakdown needs to reach more people. Comment where you are watching from. Now let me explain what sources are saying is happening inside the White House right now. Multiple people are describing a building in complete chaos. Staff members are crying openly in the hallways, some are packing boxes, others are feeding documents into shredders. The chief of staff, who reportedly refused to sign the Section 4 declaration, is now running a communications operation built around one message, that this entire event is an illegal seizure of power. At the same time, other advisors are drafting executive orders meant to fire every cabinet member who signed the declaration: the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, the Attorney General. The president wants them gone. And that creates a constitutional paradox that legal scholars have debated in theory, but never had to confront in real life. If the cabinet signed the declaration first, and presidential power transferred the moment that declaration was delivered, can the president fire those cabinet members afterward? Do their signatures still count if he removes them? Or did they stop being his subordinates the second that letter reached Congress? There is no precedent for this. There is no clean answer. The Constitution does not spell it out because the people who wrote this process assumed no one would try to break it in exactly this way. So what we have now is a government existing in two conflicting realities at the same time. Two command structures, two chains of authority, two people giving orders that cannot both be lawful. And nowhere is that contradiction more dangerous than when it comes to nuclear weapons. Stay with me here, because from an international security standpoint, this is the part that becomes genuinely terrifying. Wherever the President of the United States goes, a military aide follows with a briefcase. You know what it is: the nuclear football. It contains the materials and authentication procedures needed to authorize a nuclear strike. The Vice President also has a military aide carrying an identical briefcase. Under normal circumstances, the Vice President's codes are inactive. They are the backup. They only become operational if the President is confirmed dead or formally incapacitated. At 3:14 this morning, when the Section 4 declaration was delivered, the Vice President became acting President under the Constitution. According to the plain structure of the amendment, that means his launch authority should have activated at that moment, and the president's authority should have been shut off. But who actually makes that call? Who flips that switch? That decision runs through the National Military Command Center at the Pentagon. And according to sources, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff is currently inside the tank, the most secure conference room in the building, facing a question no chairman of the Joint Chiefs has ever had to answer. Which codes are valid? Whose orders does the military obey? If the president picks up the phone right now and orders a nuclear strike, does the military carry it out? Or does it refuse because legally he is no longer commander-in-chief? If they refuse and they are wrong, they have committed one of the most consequential acts of insubordination in American history. If they comply and they are wrong, they have followed an illegal order from someone who no longer holds presidential authority. And here is the reality of nuclear deterrence. It depends on certainty. It depends on America's adversaries knowing, without any doubt, that the country's nuclear forces are under clear, stable, coherent command and control. The second that becomes ambiguous, the second the world can see confusion over who controls those weapons, deterrence starts to weaken. Our adversaries are watching this right now. They are watching the American chain of command fracture in real time, and they are calculating. So why did the cabinet choose this moment? Why invoke Section 4 tonight, of all nights? According to a senior Justice Department official who has spoken with reporters, the cabinet met secretly last night at the Naval Observatory after a specific incident earlier in the afternoon. The details are still developing, and we need to be careful about what is confirmed and what is still allegation. But multiple sources are describing the same basic sequence. The president allegedly gave a direct order for a military operation on American soil. More specifically, he allegedly ordered active duty military personnel to seize voting machines in a key state before the upcoming election. The Secretary of Defense allegedly refused to pass that order along. The president allegedly threatened to fire him and use alternative channels instead. And according to the people who signed that declaration, that was the line. That was the moment they decided the emergency mechanism existed for exactly this kind of situation. In their view, if they did not act last night, American soldiers could have been deployed against American citizens by morning. They did not see this as a policy dispute. They did not see it as partisan maneuvering. They saw it as the final containment barrier, the emergency brake, the last resort the 25th Amendment was written to provide. But the president is telling a completely different story. Despite advisors allegedly trying to take his phone away, he has continued posting on social media. He is claiming that a cabal of globalists has infiltrated his cabinet. He is calling the constitutional action treason. He is urging his supporters to come to Washington. And that last part is what has law enforcement deeply alarmed. Subscribe right now if you have not already. Turn on the notification bell. You need to be here for what comes next because the constitutional clock is already moving. A few hours ago, the president posted a message that said, "Come to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Protect your president." We are now seeing live streams of crowds forming near the White House. People are arriving by car, by metro, and on foot. Some of them appear to be armed. DC Metropolitan Police are already stretched thin. Requests for National Guard support have been sent, and this is where the constitutional crisis becomes an operational nightmare. In Washington, D.C., unlike the states, authority over the National Guard belongs to the president. The district does not have a governor. The president controls the D.C. Guard. So if the vice president, who is constitutionally the acting president, orders the National Guard to secure the perimeter and protect federal buildings, while the president issues a competing order telling those same Guard members to stand down, which command is legal? Who do those soldiers obey? The man who was elected, or the man who now holds constitutional authority under the emergency provisions of the 25th Amendment? There is no playbook for this. There is no training scenario. There is no precedent. Every commander, every officer, every soldier is now being forced to make individual judgments about which orders are lawful. And the wrong decision in either direction could be catastrophic. Now we need to talk about the Secret Service, because what is happening there may be the most immediate flashpoint. Secret Service agents are trained to protect the president. They build relationships over years. They develop personal loyalty. They are conditioned to give their lives, if necessary, for the person they are assigned to protect. And now, overnight, they are being told that the man they have been protecting is no longer the president. They are being told the vice president across town is now their principal. According to sources, that contradiction has created an open split inside Secret Service Command. The head of the Presidential Protective Detail allegedly refuses to allow the vice president's security team onto White House grounds. His position, stated plainly, is this: I take orders from the president until he walks out of this building. No one comes in. Think about what that means. Armed federal agents, all Secret Service, facing each other across a perimeter. The president's detail on one side, the acting president's detail on the other, both believing they are following lawful orders. Meanwhile, the vice president is improvising. He cannot enter the Oval Office. He cannot access the Situation Room. He is trying to conduct the business of the presidency from the Eisenhower Executive Office building next door, working out of a conference room and coordinating with whatever cabinet members and staff now recognize his authority. The elected president has the physical seat of power. The constitutional acting president has the legal authority, and neither one can dislodge the other without risking a confrontation no one is prepared for. Here is how this plays out. Under the text of the amendment, the president has the right to send a written declaration to Congress stating that no inability exists, that he is fully able to discharge the powers and duties of the office. Sources say that letter is being drafted right now. The moment that letter reaches the Speaker of the House and the President pro tempore of the Senate, presidential power returns to him immediately, just as it transferred immediately when the Cabinet's declaration arrived. But then the burden shifts. The Vice President and Cabinet have 4 days to respond. If they send a second declaration reaffirming that the President is unable to serve, power moves back to the Vice President and Congress is forced to decide. Under the amendment, Congress must convene within 48 hours. From there, they have 21 days to settle the question. And the threshold is extremely high. To permanently remove the president, it takes a 2/3 vote in both the House and the Senate. If that threshold is not reached, the president gets his powers back, which means we could be looking at 21 days of constitutional limbo. 21 days where the legitimate holder of presidential authority is genuinely unclear. 21 days where every executive order, every military deployment, every diplomatic message exists in a gray zone of disputed legitimacy. The markets are already reacting. Futures are falling hard. Foreign capitals are in turmoil. One report says the British Prime Minister tried to call the White House and was left on hold for 20 minutes because no one could determine who had the authority to take the call. This is what systemic collapse looks like. This is the kind of thing Americans have watched happen in other countries while telling themselves it could never happen here. It is happening here. And there is a real risk, a serious and present risk, that this turns violent. If the president keeps urging supporters to gather at the White House, if those crowds try to breach the perimeter, if law enforcement or military personnel are stuck between conflicting orders about whether to disperse them or protect them, then this is no longer just a constitutional argument. This becomes armed confrontation on American soil. It becomes the possibility of Americans killing Americans over who has the right to the presidency. The Constitution was built to bend under pressure. It has bent before. It bent during the Civil War. It bent during Watergate. It bent during disputed elections. But it was never designed to be pulled this hard in this many directions at once. What we are watching right now is the American system of government at its breaking point, and the next decision made by one person in one room may determine whether it holds. I'm going to stay on this. I have live feeds from the White House, the Capitol, and the Pentagon. If the president sends his counter declaration to Congress, I will read it to you in real time. If the Joint Chiefs issue a statement, you will hear it here. If there is movement at any of those 3 locations, we will cover it live. Do not assume this ends quietly. Do not assume the institutions hold just because they always have before. Do not assume the safeguards written on paper will work when they are tested by someone willing to ignore them. The 25th Amendment has been invoked. The president refuses to comply. Two chains of command are claiming authority. Armed agents are facing off against each other. Crowds are gathering, and the world is watching. Like this stream, share it, send it to everyone you know. This is one of those moments where history turns, where the future is being decided in real time. People need to see this. They need to understand what is happening in their country right now. The safety is off. The only question now is what happens next. Stay here, stay alert. I will be back the moment anything develops.